Okay, for my lesson, I'm going to be teaching Xilone Puffer, a 9-year-old who is in the 4th grade. I've been babysitting Xilone for about 6 years now, so we know each other very well. Before I start with my actual lesson plan, there are a couple of things that we want to keep in mind before we get started. Something that I want to keep in mind throughout my entire lesson is the zone of proximal development. So the ZPD, which is in this strip here, that's where we want our students when we're teaching a lesson. As you can see, sometimes students wave in and out. Sometimes they can be confused, and sometimes they can be bored. This is good for students to have from time to time, but we don't want it to happen very often. We want people to not be confused and not be bored as they go throughout our lessons. So I'm going to be gauging Xilone throughout my entire lesson, making sure she stays in this zone. I know that at first she might be confused, and that's okay, but as long as I can get her back in the zone, it will be just fine. Something else we want to keep in mind as our lesson is going is Bloom's taxonomy. Just a reminder of how Bloom's taxonomy goes. So at first, all we do is remember things. So Bloom's taxonomy builds up to higher levels of thinking. So it starts out very low with just remembering, recalling basic facts. Then it moves up a little bit to understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and eventually creating. And we want our students to be able to move through this entire process. So at first, Xilone is going to remember things that she already knows. She can recall maybe what 2 times 4 is. She knows that that's 8. And I'm going to teach her multiplication facts. And so maybe she knows that 2 times 4 is 8, but does she understand why 2 times 4 is 8? Can she apply it to a story problem where that would apply? Other things like that. And I want to build her up through this process so that eventually she can create and have the highest level of thinking. So Xilone, as I mentioned before, is age 9. Piaget says that she's in the concrete operational stage of cognitive development. This means she is learning to problem solve with familiar objects and situations. So keeping that in mind, as I said before, Xilone may know certain multiplication facts, but she's learning how to problem solve and apply those things to different situations. So as I mentioned before with like story problems, can she problem solve? Problem solving is a huge thing in mathematics. That's why we give kids story problems so that they can use other parts of their brain and not just recall basic facts. So I know Xilone knows some of her multiplication facts, but I want her to be able to problem solve using those skills and be able to not only remember them, but understand them and apply them, etc. Erikson's theory of psychosocial development says that she is in stage 4. This is what is called industry versus inferiority. So this stage covers the early school years from approximately age 5 to age 11. So Xilone is closer to the end, but still pretty much in the middle of this stage. Through social interactions, children begin to develop a sense of pride in their accomplishments and abilities. Children who are encouraged and committed by parents and teachers develop a feeling of competence and belief in their skills. Those who receive little or no encouragement from parents, teachers, or peers will doubt their ability to be successful. So keeping this in mind for Xilone, we know that we want to be encouraging for her. This is very important. If I, during my lesson, tell Xilone that she's getting it wrong, or that she is not doing it right, or she's not good enough, these things will affect her for the rest of her life. We don't want her to feel inferior. We want her to be on the other end of the spectrum. I know that confidence is a big thing, especially in mathematics. I have worked as a tutor for this place called Mathnasium for the past 3 years now, and we know from personal experiences with students that confidence is a huge thing, and kids cannot work and cannot learn if they don't have the confidence in themselves to do it. And I know that oftentimes that the lack of confidence comes from home, maybe parents or peers or teachers, like Erikson said. So as a teacher for Xilone and as a peer for her, I know I'm not her age group, but when I babysit her, we come to the same level. I'm playing with her. I'm not above her. Like, we are equals. So I consider myself a peer of Xilone. And I know that I need to be building her up. And I think what's important is even if the answer is wrong, find a way to point out what was done correctly so that they feel like they can do math. And then that way they'll be able to build up confidence in themselves that they may do bigger math problems once they get that right. If that makes sense. So during my lesson, I need to make sure that I follow this formative assessment process. So basically, if I'm going to begin by modeling math to her, multiplication facts. So I'll probably say a few out loud. I'll probably draw some things out for her to see, and then I'm gonna have us do some problems together. And it's really good guided instruction, so she can be doing it, but I'm right there with her to help her. We're gonna have to skip the productive group work because it's just her and I. She doesn't have other peers her age in this. But then we'll go to independent learning where she will do it on her own, and obviously I will still be there, but I'm not going to be holding her hand, walking her through it. She's going to be doing it on her own, and that is like the goal in the end, is that she can do these multiplication facts on her own. A couple interesting things back to Piaget. So remember, she's in the concrete operational stage. Some interesting things that Piaget said was that children construct rather than absorb knowledge. So with this in mind, I know that I can't just say facts. I can't just tell Xilone that 8 times 9 is 72 and have her just memorize it. That's not what we want, and that's not going to work best for her at this stage in life. She needs to understand why it works, and then once that happens, she'll be able to remember and understand, and it will be retained in her brain more easily than just spewing out facts. Piaget also said children continually learn new things through 2 complementary processes, assimilation and accommodation. So assimilation entails dealing with an object or event in a way that's consistent with an existing scheme. So a scheme is like something that we already know in our head, like it's like babies, they always are putting things in their mouth. And so when you give them like a new object, like let's say you give them like a teddy bear or something, they're like, oh, object, I'm going to put it in my mouth. And now that teddy bear is added into their scheme of putting toys and things in their mouth. So I know that Xilone already, as I mentioned before, already knows some multiplication. So maybe she knows that 6 times 7 is 42, which is great. But then can she do 7 times 7 now? So I can use her existing schemes of multiplication. 6 times 7 is 42. So 7 times 7 is just one more group of 7. So instead of 6 groups of 7, we now have 7 groups of 7. So if she doesn't know what 7 times 7 is, she can take what she does know, 42, and just add 7 to it. Now we have 7 groups of 7, and she will know that 7 times 7 is 49. And then when she knows it, it can be added into the scheme. So that's like something that we really want to work on, because she's not learning multiplication for the first time. She knows some of it, she's been taught it before, but she doesn't know it 100%. She doesn't know all of her multiplication facts, and that is our goal in the end. Another thing that Piaget said was interactions with one's physical and social environments are essential for cognitive development. So Xilone has been homeschooled for the past couple of years. And so the way that they do it is her mom teaches her and her little sister downstairs in their basement. There are like tables set up and posters on the wall, and it almost looks like a mini classroom kind of. I mean, there are like toys and other things down there, but they know that, you know, at that time of day when they're down there, that they're there to learn and not to play. So I feel like that will be the best environment to teach Xilone in, because that's where she is used to doing her learning. And so I think that's really important. And I know that they do have toys and things down there, which could be a distraction, but I'm going to use those to my advantage. So I'm going to, I don't know exactly what they have, but blocks to show 3 times 4 and then fill them in with little objects is 12. Or cars, or whatever the case may be. I'm going to use things that she's familiar with to show her how multiplication works and how we use it in the real world. And something else I wanted to talk about was I want to get these multiplication facts in her long-term memory. So not just so that she can do it for the video or for her mom or whatever, but so that she knows them for the rest of her life. So there's this like process that we go through to put things in our long-term memory. And honestly, I think it's almost kind of a subconscious thing. Like, I've never put things in my long-term memory being like, first I'm going to do this and then I'll move to this stage and blah blah blah. Now I know it for sure. Like, I've never thought of it like this before, but it's really interesting and it makes a lot of sense. So it starts with rote learning, which is learning primarily through repetition and practice, a little or no attempt to make sense of what is being learned. So that would be like me being like, Xilone, 4 times 7 is 28, and she says 4 times 7 is 28, and we just say it, you know. So she doesn't really know. She's not thinking about it. She's not trying to memorize it. She heard it. Then it's rehearsal. So it's repeating information verbatim, either mentally or aloud. So this is Xilone saying 4 times 7 is 28. 4 times 7 is 28. 4 times 7 is 28. Which actually works. So I think that's more of like the remembering stage and kind of getting closer to understanding, but not quite there yet, referring to Bloom's taxonomy. Then you get into meaningful learning. So that's making connections between new information and prior knowledge. So this part right here was on chapter 4 in the brain book, which is all about the power of transfer. So it's taking what we knew and how it can either help us with new information or hinder us with new information. So I definitely don't want to hinder Xilone's learning. So I want to take the old information that she knows and have it be able to assist her in the new information. So referring back to what I said about 6 times 7 being 42, she can use that old information to help her learn that 7 times 7 is 49. Now the only problem is if she learned any of her multiplication facts incorrectly. So if she is trying to tell me that 6 times 7 is actually 44, that will hinder her learning for 6 times 7, 7 times 7, anything. We can't build off that information because it's incorrect. So hopefully when I talk to Xilone more, I will know that that is hopefully not the case. Okay, but the steps here are elaboration. So embellishing on new information based on what one already knows. So what I kind of was just talking about. Organization, making connections among various pieces of new information. So again, with the adding 7 to get 7 groups of 7. And visual imagery, forming a mental picture of something either by actually seeing it or by envisioning how it might look. So for that, what I was talking about with the toys in the basement, being able to use blocks and things like that to help her see it. But I also would like to use flashcards, and I know that some people don't agree with flashcards because they think that kids are just memorizing them. But, and maybe that's true sometimes, but I think that flashcards are very, very important. That's how I learned multiplication, and that's what I needed at first before I could understand it. But it helped me see, I could visualize the flashcard, and so when my mom was like, what's 6 times 7? I could picture it, and I knew I could see that the answer was 42. Like, I could just picture it in my head, and that, I think, helps kids a lot. So I want to use flashcards with Xilone because I think that those are really helpful, and it's important then you're getting all your senses so she can hear it because we'll speak it out loud. She can use her touch when she's moving the blocks to see that 4 times 3 is 12. And she can see it with her eyes when she sees it on the flashcard. So I think that will be really good because it can get all her senses involved. And I hope to get her up and moving around too, because I think that that is really important. So, I'm going to teach Xilone her multiplication facts, and I'm really excited to use different methods of things, like I said, with the flashcards and the blocks, and I'm going to teach her nines times tables. I'm not going to teach 1 through 12s, but just her nines, so that she can get those really solidified and she'll be able to use those forever. So that's my lesson plan.